Bingo. And I think we're live. Morning, everybody. I think this is Wednesday, and I don't know about you, but everyone's getting back to work, and it seems like the year's almost gone. It feels like everyone's in crazy land trying to get their years planned and get ready for the year, for a big year. But there's a lot of changes happening, of course, and as Meet Magic is starting to grow now, we wanted to start to add a little bit of value to the community that we've built. And that community is starting to grow in 5 countries now. So Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, UK, and the US. They're starting to get off the ground. And we've got WhatsApp groups with lots of executives in those groups, all sharing knowledge and information. And what I wanted to do with these little short podcasts is introduce some people into the mix, people that have got some knowledge to share. I think the title there, "The Future is Already Here, we just don't know how to sell it yet," is exactly what it is. And I think there's a lot of conversations that we all need to have around what technology is and how it's going to be working both now and into the future. And there's some of the leadership around technology and the vision and the future trends and what digital transformation looks like and what the ethical technology and the social responsibility side of this all looks like. And of course, my favorite topic, which is all around how technology and social impact come together. So I've got with me a guest this morning. His name is Jeremy Harkins, and he's the managing director of a company called Green Shield. And the guy's very smart, very switched on. So I wanted to introduce him and have a conversation around technology and leadership, and get some C-suite insights. So let me add Jeremy to the stage. Jeremy, good morning.
How you going?
How was that? Was that a good introduction or what?
Yeah, it was a great introduction. Thank you very much.
I was waffling at first, but why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your background? So you've done a lot of work at the unis, right?
Well, at university, yeah, I used to be a lecturer. So, look, I've had a varied career, everything from working in warehouses and petrol stations all the way up to managing a couple of businesses. So I lectured at UNSW in the architecture faculty, specifically in technology. So architectural computing was my subject. So helping the architecture and construction world start to adopt technology has kind of been my thrust for the last 20 years. I ran a business called Aneni Realtime after university. So I left university to start that business. And that was a business started in 2012 around virtual reality. So virtual reality, augmented reality, kind of visualizing buildings before they existed. We all kind of see these visualizations of new developments. That's the type of stuff we were doing, but we were doing it long before everyone else. So
that's completely random. My girlfriend's an architect. You might you might even probably know her. I don't know. It's she was at UNSW as well. I think studying. She did 6 years there at architecture, and she worked on some big developments. I think she did.
What was her name? Can you tell me her name?
I'll do it afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. Look, chances are I've probably come across her. So I taught thousands of students in my time at UNSW, and without kind of big noting myself, was somewhat forefront of the technological push towards getting architects and engineers starting to use building information modeling. So rather than kind of pen and paper, using computers to build their building. So we used to say,
which I think is very, very.
Sorry, was it?
It's very, very cool. Yeah.
Yep. So we used to say, build it once digitally first, and then that helps avoid the problems in the physical construction. So, and it's generally stayed true. Like that space has really boomed in the last few years. So I actually left Aneni Realtime about 3 years ago now, 3.5 years ago. I had some realizations and started heading in a slightly different direction. So I kind of wanted to pivot the business. My partner felt really secure in the business, so we made a decision that I'd kind of go off on my own and start my own consultancy. That eventually, after a couple of years of articulating a lot of new thoughts, led to my current business, Green Shield. So Green Shield & Co. Is aimed at helping businesses reduce data. It's a bit different than most people are thinking at the moment. Everyone's like more data, gather data. I've started going a really different direction and starting to think about, I guess, the humanity of it all. What is the balance between information, data, computing, and human outcomes, human interactivity, essentially what we do as humans and how we are as humans. And kind of as you've said previously to me, humans are quite irrational. We don't really think like a computer. We're not logical beings. So that's somewhat at the base of what Green Shield is all about. Sorry, I can't hear you. Oop. I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there we go.
A bit better. Sorry, yeah, I've lost I think my earpods just died. But so that's it.
That happens to me all the time.
Yeah, how do we balance innovation and risk management? Right there, right? It's like risk management of things not working. So why don't we start there, Jeremy, as a great starting point? Because your role as a CXO, right? And what kind of leadership strategies do you employ or what kind of leadership strategies do you think companies should employ to actually foster a culture of technological advancement? I mean, this is a big thing right now in obviously cybersecurity, but how do you balance innovation and risk management as a C-suite these days?
Yeah, well, for me, and I've kind of mentioned this before to you, but I'm seen as being a risk taker, and I don't perceive myself that way. When I think about innovation versus risk, I see the not innovating or not taking chances on new technology to be way more risky. You just have to look at lots of the disruptions which have happened across the last couple of decades to see exactly that. Kodak is a perfect example. They were at the forefront of the world with cameras, and they missed some real opportunities to effectively move forward with data storage and data handling of images. Instead, now we all use our phones. So I think when I think about risk, the risk of not doing new things is actually much greater than almost any other risk that exists. When I think about strategies associated with that, de-riskifying, if you like, a strategy or a vision really comes down to clarity. So introducing the vision to your team, to your organization in clear language, and making sure there's no holes in it. So a lot of the failures in technology generally happen because people haven't thought through till the nth degree how technology is going to affect both their business and their customer base. So I think sharing information is really important. Fostering new employees, so the youth effectively, they come with a lot of technological thinking already without even having to, as we call them, digital natives these days. So having a two-way conversation and listening to what they say is really important. And I think employing those strategies, making sure clarity is defined or your vision is defined with clear intentions, helps achieve implementing new technologies and businesses.
I mean, you mentioned something before about rationality. Humans are not rational at all. In fact, Rory Sutherland always says they're about as logical as a horse running on petrol. But when you start thinking about problem solving using rationality, do you think it's a little bit like playing golf on clock?
What do you mean by that exactly? So that just go with your gut, I guess, is what you're saying.
Well, I think when you solve problems, when you're rational, you tend to do the same things as everybody else, right? It's like a logical problem. You not only using logic to get you anywhere, you end up in the same place as your competitors, or you end up alongside, somewhere where it doesn't really get you ahead. It's just using logic mostly. So, do you think there's something in the fact that you've said you actually said you do the opposite of what most people would do, and often the opposite of a good idea can be another good idea. It's necessarily has to be a bad idea. So, is there something in that you think in terms of the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think what I'm seeing with a lot of new technology implementations is we're heading very much towards data doing the work for us. So kind of set up a system and kind of just let the information flow. And what I'm finding is that's actually removing creativity. I think that creative thinking and original thought is really important in an organization. And mistakes, while we generally don't like them in businesses, usually lead to new opportunity. And what I'm seeing across the board in business is all businesses are kind of responding the same way. They have the same strategies. They go to the same consultants for the same strategies, and there's not a lot of original thought. And there is a bit of a fear of taking those risks. What I'm heading towards with Green Shield and a book that I'm writing at the moment is starting to shift that back in a different direction. So starting to say, if you don't make mistakes, you've actually missed out on opportunities. And if you don't allow humans to be irrational and create those errors, that leads to less innovation overall. So I think mistakes are great. And it's kind of ensconced in this kind of startup idea, this idea of fail fast, that you're supposed to quickly make mistakes, learn from them, and then learn faster than your failures. As a phrase, it makes sense, but I don't see a lot of people really doing it, especially larger businesses. They kind of get ensconced in their ways, and they're not really willing to take risk and innovate in new directions.
I once heard it said that a rational leader would suggest changing course to avoid a storm, but an irrational one would actually change the weather.
Yep, that's where we're at now, pretty much, with technology.
So, I mean, you mentioned about technology in architecture. I mean, there's so much great stuff happening there where you can take a 3D model inside a building. I met a company in Silicon Valley a few years ago that was doing just that, and they had this ability to sort of basically film a 3D model inside, and you can do anything with it. But where do you think the future trends are in your industry in that space?
So where the industry's really been heading for the last kind of 5 or 10 years is towards this concept of digital twins. I don't know if you've heard of a digital twin. So a digital twin is essentially exactly what you just described, a 3D model of a real space, whether that real space exists or not. So either an imagined space that we're going to build or an existing space. And I can make a 3D model of that and then link that virtual model to physical reality. And we're seeing more and more of these things with smart homes these days. So the idea that you can have a little virtual model of your home and go turn on the lights or check that the oven is on, or access your fridge to see how many eggs you have left. And that's so a digital twin is representing the real world in the virtual world to achieve some type of outcome. And that's where I think we've really been going for a long time. Like I said, about a decade. The really big guys out there, so the Honeywells, the Schneider Electric, Johnson's Controls, they've kind of been doing this with data in the background for a long time. So an automated building, or a smart building, or whatever you want to call it. But information is quite abstract to humans, and we deal much better with visual information, so images that we can see. So I can see, oh, that's my fridge. Oh, I can click that fridge and see what's in it, for instance. So moving away from spreadsheets and databases and information towards visual information is where our industry is really heading, and that's in the form of what we're calling the digital twin. Yeah,
and you almost get a sense that the advertisers are also moving there as well, because I think metaverse, everyone was talking about it a couple of years ago, it's disappeared, but it's not really disappeared. Most of those people that are playing games have been living in those virtual worlds for God knows how long, and it's grown incredibly wild over the past few years, right? So there's millions of people playing games in those virtual worlds, and all the advertisers are now. I think there was a report recently that said that the advertising spend in the virtual world is going to eclipse what was being spent in a certain part of advertising in the physical world. So I think there's definitely some trend in that. What about in digital transformation? Have you got any examples of where you've seen like a company go on a successful transformation initiative?
Yeah. So look, that's effectively been my entire career. Like I was doing digital transformation before the term even existed. And so when I was at university, I implemented new computing systems for all of the degrees in our faculty, being interior design, project management, construction management, architecture computing. So what we pushed was essentially moving away from the drawing board and physical media to a digital version of it. So what they call the paperless office these days. Interestingly, and this kind of is where GreenShield is going, I've seen a bit of a reverse in that. I think that I'm not sure that the digital office is actually more sustainable than the physical office these days. Having said that, probably the biggest project of digital transformation that we ever worked on was Barangaroo. So Barangaroo started back in the early 2000s, essentially, conceived and designed. By the time we came on the job, it was 2012, and they had thousands of drawings. So digital drawings, physical drawings, hundreds and hundreds of contractors all giving information to pull this together. We pulled all of that information together, digitized it, and then made a virtual model of Barangaroo for operations. So the operations managers could see Westpac, for instance, who's one of the base tenants of one of the towers, see how many people had scanned in that day, and then start managing people flow through a building. So this was, again, before digital transformation had been coined, but it somewhat led to, I think, what digital transformation is, because with big businesses were trying to move away from their, or trying to make more efficient their processes.
Yeah, I think you often see these big projects that are taking place. I think it might be to roll out big piece of software or something. You often find that they don't take the staff along on the journey, and often they've just spent $1 million on that software and they can't even install it if no one's using it. So
that's right.
There's a lot around how you align that technology, both with the people and the processes, to achieve those outcomes. And I think there's lessons learned everywhere, but I just don't think there's any right or wrong way of doing things. And you see some that are really successful and some that are not. But then of course, now you've got to throw into the mix all the ethics and social responsibility. I think when you start to look at the top 5 business issues that are coming down this year in 2024, regulation change is going to be one of those things, and that's going to include, how you're using technology ethically, or whether you're being socially responsible with it. So, as a leader, how do you think people should ensure that those ethical considerations and social responsibility agendas are integrated into the decision-making process?
Yeah, look, it's a hard area, and I personally feel like there's a little bit of a contradiction between ethical technology and technology. In a certain way, every time that we make a technology leap forward, or have for at least the last few decades, it comes at a resource cost, and that resource cost has a direct relationship to social impact or social responsibility. So, for instance, we were talking before about bottled water. Bottled water is great. It's a great convenience. We should all drink and stay hydrated. But some of the companies doing it, they get the water from mountain springs, and I'm not totally sure that it is the most socially responsible outcome. So how do I manage that? I think being aware of your team, again, a two-way conversation is really important, and making sure that that everyone is heard, that people's grievances and so forth are brought to the forefront and then dealt with in a responsible way, and that leads to good ethics and good outcomes. One example I've kind of given a few times is this idea of Tesla. We're pushing towards the electrification of pretty much everything these days because of carbon offset and making the planet a green place. But a lot of their products use carbon-based technologies to be built. So there's a bit of a contradiction in really large business and how they ethically achieve their product and end goals. Of course, does the goal justify the means? That's an interesting question, I think, worth asking. And if we're heading towards a carbonless environment, electrified systems does seem to be a really good way to go.
Yeah, I think you could apply that logic to anything that's happening inside a company with technology. You know, I think people have got two default modes. One of those default modes is to continue doing what you've always done before. And the second one is to do what everybody else is doing. And the only reason they tend to do what everybody else is doing is to try and find that peer group approval or try and get that status. And they'd rather have that than a commercial success with a project that's been completed really successfully. And you just got to look at the human behavior side of this thing. I think, you know, what was that somebody said once? Success has many fathers, and failure is an orphan. You know, everybody wants to attach their name to a really successful project or a campaign or something that's happened, but they certainly don't want to attach their name to something that's failed. And you know, I think there's an opportunity somewhere, going back to your point about being different and doing the opposite of what you necessarily think. I think we have an opportunity as small companies that are not necessarily tied by all those big rules. You can do things that are culturally a little bit different than your competitors. When I say that, I mean, go back to England, for example, when Murdoch had all those trash magazines that came out. You know, you'd have, I don't know, the Star, the Sunday Express, or the Sunday, what was that, Sunday Express, whatever it was called. It was a trash magazine, basically, full of
tabloids, basically.
And, you know, people with their boobs out, and it was a trash magazine, basically. But it was it was sports stars sleeping with their neighbour's cat or something stupid. But this is what people wanted to read about. They were curious about that. But that's what made the Star and the Sun and the Sunday, whatever times it was, Sunday Sport, that was it. The Sunday Sport that's what made it successful. But the one thing their competitors, like the Financial Times and the Guardian, couldn't do was write stories like that. And so there was a cultural thing that they were, you know, you could do something different culturally as a business to get yourself ahead. And I'm wondering if there's something in technology that we can do to actually drive the adoption. You can be a little bit culturally risque, let's say, not risky, but risque. I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, do you think there's something around? I mean, ethics, and obviously you're going to come into that again, right?
Yep. Yeah, look, I think that's, you know, one thing which we have to be careful with technology is not to lose our humanity. And we all like, well, you know, for want of a better word, sexy things, whether it be sexy males or sexy females. And that's driven a lot of industries. It's driven, you know, DVD sales, Blu-ray sales. Most of our technology storage mediums have been related to similar type of tabloid or the less highbrow type media out there. And so I think we have to just be very careful. Remember, we are all human, and make sure that that is somewhat ensconced in our technology. Do we really want computers to decide what's right for us? Because what's right is having a couple of children and having a home and contributing to society, the way I see it.
Yeah, well, it's a great way to end in this. I mean, this is my favourite subject around social impact and technology involved in that. We built a business that allows people to come together and solve business problems with technology and have a social impact at the same time. So, you know, I guess as a final question, you know, you're in data, obviously, and I think it's always important to remember that big data all comes from the same place, which is us. And any slight black swan event can throw the most perfectly calibrated model into chaos. What do you think about technology and its role in social impact these days? Because it seems like everybody's got a purpose nowadays. A few years ago when we started Meet Magic, nobody was talking about ESG. Nobody even knew what the thing was. And I think if you mention the word sustainability to anybody, if you mention the word sustainability to a CEO, it's like a punch you in the head because they're over it. And so, what do you think is technology's role in social impact today? Where do you think that's going to go?
So I see a big paradigm shift coming, and that's again why I started Green Shield, to be at the forefront of this new paradigm which is coming. And what I really see is a move away from data and a move towards human centricism. So keeping humans at the center of how we do things. When I think about technology, what I've seen over the last decade really is that technology has become synonymous with information and data. Essentially, if you don't have data, you don't really have technology. It's kind of the view of it. I see things really differently and it probably comes from being in the architecture field or the architectural field, is I see physical objects and new ways of doing things to be real technology. I think there's a focus on the data has led us down a path where we think that data is really important. And I think the most important thing here is really humans in the end. So the paradigm shift I see coming is, and it's a bit of a contradiction in a way, because I actually think that one of the largest problems in the world right now, which is what I call the elephant in the cloud, which is the title of my upcoming book, is data storage. We have huge data centers that are very resource hungry. And, when you take a video of grandmom at Christmas, that gets uploaded to the cloud and then copied in multiple places and redundancies. So one little video could be hundreds of megabytes worth of data, which actually equates to a huge amount of power consumption over the next 20 or 30 years. So what I see coming is a move away from data storage towards a much greater data generation. So I think quantum computing will be key to this, where instead of storing information, we generate a lot more, deal with it in real time to essentially achieve social outcomes. So this is where the social impact bit comes into it. That quantum computing will help us become more human by relying less on legacy data or information from the past and living more in the moment. And that's kind of where I see the paradigm shift coming. Yeah. So it's very new ideas.
I think if what I'm hearing is right, it's like what you're saying is the evolved sort of human instinct may be much better at statistics than the modern day economists.
That's right.
And that's I think, I remember listening to a story once about a girl that was walking down the road. It was midnight, and she heard this rustling in the bushes, and she bolted off. And when she turned around, she realised, it was just a cat. So at worst, she felt a little bit stupid, but that was a little bit embarrassed. But that's about it. But it could have actually been a lion, and she could have been dead, right? So, but the point is, that instinct is what's evolved over time to protect her from being eaten by the lion. And so that, I think, that sort of behavior is something for us to look at in terms of how we adopt technology. I mean, I think about cybersecurity in the same way. What is the psychological things that we need to look at? What is the magic that we can create with psychology that actually gets us further ahead than just trying to use the technology itself? So I think we can create magic in the brain much easier than we can in reality. And that I think.
Yeah, like we're better than machines. I think that's what it comes down to. I think and this is, like I said, quite different than the way a lot of people are thinking. We're on the AI trail, new robots coming out to do jobs for us. But what I see is a loss of character. I see when we get machines to do work for us, we miss out on the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from our mistakes. So how I kind of sum up what you said about the woman running away from the sound in the bushes is intuition is the most valuable thing we have as a species. And it's something that we haven't been able to replicate, and I'm not sure we'll ever be able to replicate with machines. So human intuition needs to be bolstered by technology, not limited by it. And I think that's going to be a future trend where, and we kind of do this with phones already. The technology we like the most are things that are intuitive. So this is why the Apple iPhone did so well. One button. And this is what I've said for a long time. If you can reduce a whole bunch of complexity to a single button and make it intuitive so people know when to press that button, then that's a much greater outcome than any of the information that you've stored behind that button.
It's very interesting. It's fascinating. This could go everywhere. I often think that the number of people that think they actually understand statistics dangerously dwarfs those that actually do. And you know, maths can fundamentally cause problems if they're badly used. And that's, I think, something for us to all look at. But Jeremy, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I'd love to take some of these snippets and post them out there and let people see it, because I think there's a lot of value in what you've just shared. But thanks for joining us, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Yeah, I look forward to our next conversation.
No worries. Take care.
Thanks, mate. See you later.